Patch 12.8 is under a week away, and these changes seem to be coming thick and fast, and honestly we are all for it. A ton more champions are getting buffed, which means more changes to the meta again, which is definitely a good thing for the game. Before we get into the video, don't forget to head to our website and check out all of the guides we have to offer for every single champion. Click the link in the description to find out more. So let's not keep you waiting any longer and jump straight into all of those tasty champion buffs. First off, we have Mordekaiser, and he's getting a movement speed increase on his passive from a flat 3% to 3% at level 1, 6% at level 6, and 9% at level 11. This is a really positive change. Movement speed in League of Legends is a pretty OP stat, so this allows Mordekaiser to chase better or escape better and just thrive more in those extended fights, which he already excels in. Vladimir is getting his base armor increase from 23 to 27. This is going to help him out a bit in those AD matchups and will allow him to survive a bit easier and scale up to that mid to late game. Vladimir is not really played as much as you'd expect at the moment, but any buff will always encourage people to play him more. Poppy is also getting some really interesting buffs this patch. First off, Poppy's anti-mobility ability in her W is now having a lower cooldown, which is a nice enough change already. But it's the massive buffs to her ultimate are what's really going to make the difference. So Poppy's R1 knockup duration is now 1 second, up from 0.75 seconds. This way of using her ultimate is often in most burst scenarios to add it to your combo for its extra CC and damage. An extra 0.25 seconds of CC is a huge buff already. They are also halving the channel refund time when this ability is cancelled to 15 seconds down from 30. A quick tip if you didn't know whilst you're here is you can actually cancel the charging part of Poppy's ultimate by pressing the recall button. Now there's also some really exciting buffs to the second part of this ability though. The missile speed and the knockback distance of her R2 are both being buffed significantly. This is going to be an amazing change when disrupting teamfights or even 1v2ing in the lane phase. Poppy is already a fantastic weak-sided top laner, and these buffs to her ultimate will make a huge difference. In my opinion, she's already pretty underrated and very underplayed. Whether it's in the top or the jungle, expect Poppy to be played a lot more in patch 12.8. Sejuani's getting a buff to her passive cooldown from a flat 12 seconds to now 12 to 6 seconds based on her level. This buff will help her out with that tankiness that she receives after not taking damage for 12 seconds, which is now getting reduced. This will 100% be noticeable throughout the later stages of the game in those extended fights for certain. Fiddlesticks is getting his W healing buffed against champions. This isn't going to be that noticeable in the early gangs, but once you've maxed it at level 9, it's a 20% increase. That's absolutely massive, and Fiddlesticks is already a brilliant champion at the moment if you do know how to play him. Fiddlesticks mains all around the planet will be very happy with this change. Zoe's Q mana cost is being buffed all ranks, and so is the mana cost of her ultimate. Zoe does feel like she's been a little bit forgotten about recently, but there is still quite a substantial amount of players that do great things with this champion. Be prepared though to remember just how horrible a good Zoe player can be to play against in patch 12.8. Kassadin is getting his Q shield nerfed in the baseline, but it's having a 10% increase to its ability power ratio. This means it's not going to shield him as much in the early game, but make him harder to take down when he's got a bit more AP. This is likely to encourage people to stop building him with tanky items and focus on that full mage assassin playstyle instead. Vel'Koz's Q AP ratio is going up by 10% from 80 to 90, and the initial part of his W damage is also getting buffed by 5%. These two minor changes will definitely help out the small amount of Vel'Koz mains that there are out there. Vel'Koz is a champion I just never seem to see in many of my games, so it's understandable to me that he's receiving these buffs. Xerath's E stun duration is getting buffed by 0.25 seconds based on the distance travelled. Xerath is another artillery mage similar to Vel'Koz that hasn't been performing as well as usual and isn't as popular as he has been in the past. The support meta has been very much Enchanter focused, so by buffing these two pokey mages we can expect them to make a little return next patch. Sylas is also receiving buffs, and as a champion he's definitely recognised by his ultimate, and it's by far his most iconic and identifiable part of his kit. Sylas's ultimate is getting a monstrous buff, reducing the cooldown at all ranks. It's going from 100 to 80 seconds at level 6, 70 to 55 seconds at level 11, and 40 to 30 seconds at level 16. Once you have got a bit of ability haste under your belt, this ultimate is going to feel like it's up a hell of a lot more often. In the early to mid game, this buff is going to make Sylas feel a lot stronger for sure, and it'll still be noticeable in the late game too. Ezreal is another champion like many of the picks getting buffed in this patch that hasn't been played as much as you'd actually expect recently, and he's definitely not performing as well as the other dominant meta AD carry picks. Ezreal's ultimate is being buffed from 120 seconds at all ranks to 120 seconds at rank 1, 105 at rank 2, and 90 seconds at rank 3. With the ability haste you build on this champion and the fact you can reduce the ultimate's cooldown by landing those Qs, it's going to make Ezreal's ultimate usable a lot more often and should definitely help him out next patch. Tristana is getting her base AD per level increase from 3.3 to 3.7. Another minor change for a champion who's just not had too much action recently. It will be interesting to see if she returns in the bot lane though, or if people just play her in the mid lane instead. You're going to get more experience in the mid lane, which means this buff is actually going to take more effect in that position. Bard is having his passive damage increased at a base level and every 5 chimes. This will definitely be a change that is noticeable for this guy, who is probably actually one of the funnest champions in the entire game. But he's just not been very popular recently, especially since those Locket of the Iron Solari nerfs. Bard's W max heal when it's fully charged is also being buffed at all ranks. This will help out by offering Bard more sustain in the mid game and could help when poking and sieging. Finally, the last champion getting buffed in patch 12.8 is Jhin, and actually I'm not really too sure why. Jhin has been having a brilliant season so far and has remained one of the best AD carries in the game since the very start of this season. Jhin did get hit slightly last patch though with the 20-second nerf to Gale Force's cooldown, but I don't think it's been enough to warrant any buffs. So what are they actually buffing on this champion? Jin's WCC duration is going up by 0.25 seconds at every single rank. That 0.25 seconds on rank 1 W in lane is going to make a massive difference to those early fights and 2v2s. When it's maxed in the mid game, it's definitely going to help out with his self-peeling and his catch potential too. This means you also have more of a window to fire up your ultimate after landing your W, and it should guarantee you land at least the first shot out of 4. Jin's E cooldown is being buffed a tiny bit too, and the damage on Jin's E and W no longer is reduced against monsters. This change is a little bit more welcome in my opinion. Jhin does lack some serious damage when it comes to dragons and barons compared to those attack speed based hyper carries, so this change should allow him to provide extra DPS and secure those objectives easier. Don't get me wrong, Jin's 4th shot does do a lot of damage to barons and dragons and can be a way to actually outsmart some bad junglers. But these buffs will help him actually do more DPS to these objectives and take them down quicker. It also means that Jhin can farm the jungle better when there's no minions in lane for him to farm. Okay, well that's everything for the champion buffs this patch, and now we're going to take a look at the champion nerfs. Make sure you stick around though, as at the end of this video we're checking out that Swain rework. The first champion getting nerfed is Soraka. She has truly been the GOAT of this season so far, if you know what I mean, and her healing contribution has just been absolutely insane. Soraka's win rate is very high at almost all ranks, and she's incredibly hard to beat, especially since they granted her ultimate the ability to cleanse grievous wounds. Soraka's W heal is being nerfed at all ranks, and so is the AP ratio by 5%. This will 100% make a difference, but don't worry, it's not going to make her completely useless. They are just a step in the right direction to balance this champion. Jinx's base health is being nerfed from 610 to 560. This nerf is pretty big, as Jinx's early game is her most vulnerable part of her game and easily the biggest time you have to punish her. Reducing her base health makes it even weaker, and I think the days of running longsword and potions are probably gone, as you're going to need that Doran's Blade to make up for the lost health. Jinx mains correct me if I'm wrong with that one, but this nerf is bigger than you might expect. Jinx has been dominating that bot lane all season, so these nerfs are probably welcome. Xayah has been destroying the Rift with her lethality setup yet again recently, and Riot are doing something about it. Xayah's Q damage is being nerfed at all levels alongside the Q cooldown at later ranks. You are still going to be able to play lethality Xayah, however this nerf is encouraging people to play the traditional crit setup and max her E instead. Maxing E on Xayah can be absolutely brutal, but it does require a bit more positional practice and kiting rather than the Q max poke, poke and poke some more. That concludes the few champions that are getting nerfed this patch, and now we're going to take a look at the champion adjustments. Full AP Kai'Sa mains, you should look away for this part. Or actually maybe you shouldn't, otherwise you might think it's still viable next patch. Newsflash, it's probably not. Kai'Sa's WAP ratio is being nerfed from 70% to 45%, meaning the days of stacking full AP and just playing around your W are probably over. To compensate for this, Kai'Sa's ultimate's AP ratio is being buffed from 75% to 100%, and so is her passive missing health damage ratio going from 2.5% per 100 AP to 5%. These adjustments seem to be aimed at removing Bursty Luden's W spam Kai'Sa and bringing her back to an AP attack speed build or even the hyper carry AD build instead. Now it's time to look at those massive Swain changes. He is going to be a completely different champion after this patch, and it's a pretty huge rework in general. They are still keeping the same abilities, but they are changing their numbers and changing the way that they work. Even if you're not too interested in playing Swain, we'd advise sticking around so you know how to play against him, as there'll be a ton of people playing him next week. So before we go into the details, these numbers are not final, so some things may change before the packs next week, but this is what we know so far. Let's start with Swain's passive. Swain's healing is now being buffed at level 16. These healing percentages will stay the same as they are now at level 1, 6 and level 11, but now there's also a final tier of healing at level 16. Swain's health per soul fragment is also being buffed from 5 to 12. Swain can no longer pull or damage CC'd enemies with his passive now, and instead that's being shifted over to his E. Swain's Q costs a lot less mana at all ranks now. The cooldown is lower at earlier ranks too, and the damage is being buffed at all ranks as well. The additional bulk damage of the Q is being nerfed a bit earlier and buffed a bit later, with more damage at higher ranks, and they've added a 10% AP ratio too. This ability's maximum damage is also being buffed at all levels, but the ability power ratio is being changed from different amounts at certain ranks to a flat 80%. Tons of positive changes and buffs for Swain's Q for sure. Swain's W now costs less mana, and when you ping this ability it shows enemies in range, similar to other semi-global abilities like Twisted Fate and Nocturne's ultimates. Swain's E can now be reactivated to pull all champions routed by this ability. The cooldown of this is also being reduced by 20% during Swain's ultimate. This is a massive change already and sounds like a lot of fun to play with. Swain's ultimate is really what's receiving the most amount of changes though. The cooldown is now much lower and gets lower with each rank, as previously it was just a flat 120 seconds. The drain damage per second is being buffed at earlier levels and nerfed at later levels, alongside nerfing its AP ratio slightly. The base drain healing per second is being nerfed slightly too, but its AP ratio is being buffed. Swain's ultimate now no longer grants any health instantly upon cast. When you cast your ultimate though, you gain 50 demon power. Swain's ultimate lasts as long as Swain has demon power, which drains down at a rate of 10 per second. Whilst you're draining an enemy champion though, Swain gains 20 demon power per second. 3 seconds after casting the first part of Swain's ult, he can cast the second part. The second part of this ultimate now deals a lot more base damage, and it has a 10% higher AP ratio too. Swain's R2 also slows enemies by 60%, decaying over 1.5 seconds, and casting this no longer cancels the ultimate. He can use his R2 one time after using his R1, and it won't cancel the ultimate, and instead it will just drain down and run out when Swain is not draining any nearby champions. This means as long as you're draining enemy champions, it can last forever. Swain's R2 damage also no longer charges up based on the enemy health that's drained either. Overall, these Swain changes are pretty huge. They completely change his playstyle and overall just buff him in all aspects of his kit. To me, these changes absolutely scream solo lane Swain, and although they will also buff him as a support too, I can't help but feel like he's going to be a bit broken in the solo lanes. With so much more scaling damage and healing and higher AP ratios, it just seems like that's going to be the best option. Top lane Swain with a bulky AP build sounds pretty nuts to me. Can you imagine how unkillable he's going to be inside 5 enemies, draining constantly with some AP and a Spirit Visage? I guess we'll just have to wait and see in patch 12.8 next week. Well, that's going to wrap up all of the changes that we know about coming to League of Legends in patch 12.8. Loads of champions we haven't seen for quite some time getting buffed, and a few champions we've seen a bit too much of getting nerfed. Not too much to complain about in this one for me, but I'm definitely intrigued to see just how strong this Swain rework is. That's all from us here at Mobalytics, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.